Animation, from the Latin word animationem, meaning the action of imparting life. Animation started long before cinematography, as humans have been attempting to depict motion as far back as the Paleolithic period with shadow play. Around 3200 BCE, a bull is discovered in Iran with 5 sequential images painted around that show phases of a goat attempting to nip a tree. In 1833, the phenakistoscope was invented and would develop the stereoscopic principle of modern animation. In Germany, the Nipkow disc was invented in 1884, which is a spinning disc with a spiral pattern of holes in it, thus causing a scan line, or rasterization. A French inventor, Charles-Émile Reynaud, developed an early form of film reel, being projected in 1888. In 1906, amplification tube technology would further develop with American Lee DeForest in the Triode vacuum tube. Only 2 years later, the first known crude cell animation would be known as the oldest film, Phantasmagorie, by Émile Cohl of France. A year later, the first live transmission of images would be with the 64 selenium cells, or an 8x8 pixel image which would transmit the alphabet. In 1911, the first crude images were transmitted via cathode ray tube, or CRT. During the 1910s, the term cartoon would be coined. War, from the Proto-Germanic versal, meaning mixture or confusion. On June 28, 1914, Gavrilo Princip, a Yugoslav nationalist and member of the Black Hand, would assassinate Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the crown of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and would kickstart one of the deadliest conflicts in history. War in Europe had been brewing for decades, especially in the Balkans, with the decline of the Ottoman Empire, the formation of Italy, and the formation of Germany. Earlier, in 1854, Japan would open up due to American gunboats, and began taking Western ideas, along with animation. In 1868, the Japanese emperor had gained full power over the government, and ended the shogunate. However, this would lead Japan being an authoritarian nation with very little non-Japanese people. In 1901, the Black Hand would be formed, later being officially known as unification or death. In 1908, Austria would annex Bosnia, which would later cause the death of the Archduke. In 1914, World War I would start, after Serbia refuses the Austrian demands. In 1918, World War I would end, with the Treaty of Versailles being signed in 1919. The treaty would change Europe for the worse. As Japan would gain German Micronesia and Guangdong, Germany would be seen as a culprit for World War I and would be put into harsh punishment. This would lead to extremists dotting Europe. These extremists would turn Italy fascist in 1924 and Germany in 1933. In 1937, the Japanese would attack the warring Chinese states in the Second Sino-Japanese War. Japan, Italy, and Germany would form the Tripartite Pact, which would develop into the Axis powers. In 1939, Germany would attack Poland, starting World War II. Germany would use blitzkrieg tactics, or lightning war, to occupy the Allied powers, as Japan would attack the vast British Empire and the warring Chinese states. In 1941, Operation Barbarossa would commence, with the European Axis powers invading the Soviet Union. Later in the same year, on December 7, 1941, a day to live in infamy, Japan attacked the United States with Congress and immediately declaring war, putting America in the America would counter the Japanese by using island-hopping strategies as the Soviets heavily resist German opposition. This would lead to the Soviet victory of Stalingrad and the American victory of the Naval Battle of Midway. These victories would turn the tide of war as Germany began to decline, as D-Day and the invasion of Italy would commence in 1944. The spring of 1945, Germany would surrender after the suicide of Hitler and the collapse of the Nazi government. Later that year, the secret American Manhattan Project would be complete as the United States drops 2 nuclear bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The Japanese Bushido Code would have stated never surrender, how the Japanese government would capitulate in 1945. The Americans would occupy them and westernize them by restructuring their government, economy, and culture. With the sudden economic boom, Japan decides to leave behind the conflict of the past and move towards recreation. In 1948, Moguri no Aventura would be aired, being the first televised and colored anime. Throughout the remainder of the 50s and 60s, early anime would develop. Anime would be popularized in the West in the late 80s and 90s due to movies and shows like Akira and Dragon Ball. Anime is now a staple in pop culture all around the world. Anime was an effect caused by the westernization of Japan brought forth from the end of the Japanese imperialism and global armed conflict caused by the death of an Austrian